By being here today, you are all furthering the cause of Palestine that slight bit further down the track to freedom. I ask you to continue in doing so until the walls of apartheid are torn down and Palestine is free, inshallah. I would also like to thank Rochdale Mosque for the beautiful venue they have provided us with, APEN and Justice for Palestine as the co-hosts of this event, as well as Palestinian Food Brisbane, run by Uncle Rashad, who has catered for this event. We have a beautiful program ahead of us, one which will begin very shortly. Before I provide you all with a rundown of today's event, I would like to begin first with an acknowledgement of country. I begin by acknowledging that we gather today on stolen land, the stolen land of the Yagara and Yugamber peoples, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend those respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. As with Palestine, this land's sovereignty was never ceded, treaties were never signed. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And in that same breath, we echo the words, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Palestine will be free. Both the Palestinian struggle and the Aboriginal struggle go hand in hand as the struggle of an indigenous peoples. I thank the indigenous peoples of this country for standing with justice and standing with Palestine. Often you find that their flags are as abundant as our flags at the rallies, and it is absolutely beautiful to find the two flying side by side. It is often beautiful, protesting, raising awareness within communities, and crying out for Palestine. A grassroots movement may be the only political strategy which connects directly to the people. And that is why we have come here today, to listen, to learn, to think, and to ask about these grassroots movements and the strategy of electoral politics. This morning will consist of 3 speeches from 3 influential voices within our community on the topic of grassroots movements and electoral politics, which will be followed by a Q&A panel chaired by Auntie Remah Naji, where you can ask any of our 3 speakers of this morning about these topics and more. After the Q&A, we will serve a delicious Palestinian lunch, a time to connect to those around you and also just enjoy them. I'd like to call upon Binil Mahmoudin, the Secretary of Queensland Muslims Incorporated, who's also known to me as Father.
Assalamu alaikum, which means an unconditional form of peace be upon each and every one of you. The other day I was asked by this brother, how many of this t-shirt do I have? Because this is what he has always seen me. So I'm standing here looking at Nasser. I'm going to ask the same question. That's an awesome t-shirt, bro. How many of them do you have? But more importantly, where do we get one from? I won't take long. Like you, I too am excited to listen and be inspired from this expert panel. And I thank Brother Nasser Mashni, Sister Remah, Professor Halim, and you all for being here on a Saturday morning to be involved in this discussion about making an impact, creating a positive change. When I think about grassroots movement and electoral politics, this idea to influence an outcome that brings balance when there is imbalance, to establish justice when there is injustice, I think of 2 vital elements. Number 1 is to understand, to believe that we as human beings have no option but to be that vehicle, that vessel of change. There is a famous quote from our tradition where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Man ra'a minkum munkar," whosoever sees an act of evil, an obligation falls upon that person. فَلْيُغَيِّرُ بِيَدِهِ. That person is obliged to fix it with their hands, to put an action in place so that that evil is removed from society. And if that person does not have the capacity to do so, فَبِلِسَانِهِ, then that person is to remove that evil with his tongue, to spread an awareness, to educate people, to raise a collective voice so that that evil is removed from society. And if that person does not have the capacity to do so, فَبِقَلْبِهِ, then let that person oppose that evil with their heart, and to never lose hope, to continue to believe that that evil will be removed from society. You see, there is no fourth option where we can just ignore the evil. And the second element is to trust the power of truth and justice. This firm belief that you can bring about change, that you can change the equation, you can restore the balance, you can remove that evil from society. You see, every grassroots movement is sprung to stand up against an opponent that has laid its foundations, its tentacles in compromised economic, political, judicial, educational, social, and electoral structures. To allow for that imbalance to be there in the first place, to allow for that evil to exist with absolute impunity. And so this oppressive opponent is perceived to be far bigger, far mightier, and sometimes insurmountable. But our scriptures say, "Kam min fiyatin qalilatin ghalabat fiyatin kaseera." And how many times have we seen a small, seemingly insignificant group of people overcome a much larger, far mightier group of people? Bi-iznillah, wallahu ma'as sabirin. By the will of the Creator, and the Creator is with those who persevere, endure, and remain resilient. My brethren, it is in those moments when we are obsessed with truth and justice, we find ourselves to be empowered beyond measure. Peace.
Thank you, Dad. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Halim Rane as our first speaker for the morning. Uncle Halim is a leading scholar of Islamic studies who specializes in the relationship between Islam and the West. He's recognized for his innovative and transformative research, teaching, and community engagement. Professor Halim Rane.
Morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for coming out on a Saturday morning. But it's very important that you have. Because if we are not actively standing against this genocide, we are enabling it. Today I'm going to talk about our responses to genocide and genocide enablers. Before I get into that though, I'm going to talk a little bit about how human beings can coexist with one another. And I'm going to ask you to reflect on all of human history, going back to time immemorial, thinking about how did human beings coexist with one another. What about the indigenous peoples of all the various lands here in Australia who we acknowledge? We're on stolen land here in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, New Zealand, other places. Think about every religion that you know about. Think about every civilization that you know of. One common factor that you'll find with all of them is that human beings have organised our relations with each other. We have settled disputes with one another. We have established peace with one another through what we call covenants. A covenant is basically a mutual agreement, a bond, a commitment. In Islam, the Quran uses two main words for covenant, ahad and mithaq. And ahad and mithaq, or covenants, cover a whole range of relationships, including our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you refer to the 7th chapter of the Quran, verse 172, there's a very important verse in there that describes a moment of pre-earthly state where Allah addressed the souls of the human beings that would come in the future. And He made them testify, saying, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And the response from the souls of all of the people that would come was, Bala shahidna, yes, we testify to this. This is what we refer to as the primordial covenant. If we read further in the Quran, we can see that Allah established covenants with all of the prophets, and He had particular covenants with certain prophets, like, for example, Prophet Adam, like with Prophet Abraham, Prophet Ibrahim. We also see in the Quran that Allah established covenants with various peoples throughout history. For example, the Bani Israel, or the children of Israel, the tribes of Israel. Yeah. And of course, we see covenants with the people of Prophet Muhammad's time, peace be upon him. And we know by studying the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, this was the way he engaged with the people around him. When he made his migration from Mecca to Medina, the first thing he did after establishing the mosque was to make a treaty with the people, or a covenant with the people. We refer to that as Sahifa Medina, or the Constitution or Charter of Medina. Now, Medina at the time wasn't just all Muslim people. It was non-Muslims, Muslims, Arabs, Jews, even polytheists were living in Medina. But the Charter of Medina established that everybody in this city is one ummah. We are one community. And all the various tribes and entities had their various rights and responsibilities. And everybody had a collective responsibility to defend that city if it came under attack. This was the Constitution of Medina. The Prophet also, peace be upon him, used covenants with his enemies. And a great example of that is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah that many would know about. It established peace between the Quraysh tribe and the people of Medina, the people of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That was violated after a short period of time. But the essence of the point is that this is how we engage with people. We make covenants and treaties. So Islam is a religion where we've got extensive examples of this. If we look right closer to home, have a look at the indigenous people of Australia. They have a tradition of covenants and treaties as well. The Yolngu people in the north of Australia, their word for this is makarata. This word has been adopted by indigenous people all around the country. The makarata literally means to penetrate the thigh of an adversary with a spear. And you think to yourself, that doesn't sound like peacemaking or treaty. What does that have to do with anything? The indigenous people understood what the essence of a treaty or a covenant must be, and that is to bring balance between people. There are always going to be people in the world who will try and use their resources, their physical attributes, their dominance in some way or another to dominate over another people, to oppress another people, maybe even to exterminate another people. So a covenant is necessary to bring that balance. No matter how powerful you are, everybody has the right to exist, and everybody has the right to live in safety and security from the hands of everybody else. That's what the Makarata is all about. It is about peacemaking. It is about coming to equitable terms with a people so we can coexist with them peacefully. So every people have this tradition. Now we're living in a world where the covenants that basically govern international relations are being torn to shreds by the fact that Israel is able to commit this genocide and continue to occupy Palestine for over 7 decades with impunity. It's this factor that is tearing the rules-based international order apart. Now I want to come to this point about genocide and genocide enablers. When we're confronted with something so egregious as a genocide, there is no sitting on the fence. There is no saying, I don't get involved in politics, or we're apolitical over here. If you are not actively opposing the genocide, you are supporting the genocide. Everybody must understand this. Every mosque must understand this. Every community organisation must understand this, and every individual must understand this. We have witnessed for almost 1 year now the worst atrocities any of us have seen in our lifetime, live on our phones. This is the first genocide that everybody in the world, across the whole planet, has watched live. We have witnessed, because the Israeli soldiers recorded it all, people slaughtered, men, women and children, raped, mutilated, all of it. The worst atrocities you can think of, we have seen it, everybody has seen it. So, how do people respond? There's a few different ways. In our society, if we look broadly, we've got people who are textbook genocide enablers. The two political parties are textbook genocide enablers, and everybody who belongs to those parties are enabling this genocide. They support it, they refuse to condemn, they excuse it, or they try to ignore it. Or they try to say it's not genocide. This is genocide enabling. There are people who fit into the category of what I would call business as usual. people in the Muslim community like this as well, shamefully. They say, well, you know, we want to keep good relations with people. We want to continue to support people, and maybe we can influence them like this. Let me tell you, if you study the literature, the scholarly research on civil rights movements, anti-apartheid movements, anti-war movements, anti-genocide movements, never is this successful, never. There is no evidence of that being successful whatsoever. Rather, the evidence is to the contrary. This approach of business as usual is counterproductive, and it enables the genocide. And this goes for the other group as well, these opt-out, the opt-out group. These are people who are apolitical, I don't get involved in politics. Some even in the Muslim community say, I don't vote, it's un-Islamic, it's haram. Yeah, let me tell you something. The word haram is a weighty word that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, has the prerogative to declare something haram. You show us, if you're telling the truth, where is this in the Quran? Where is this in the Sunnah? You heard from Badil just now, he quoted you a famous hadith that everybody knows. If you see something wrong, you are obliged to stop it with your hand. If you can't do that, you have to speak against it. And if you can't do that, you have to know in your heart that it is wrong. There is no sitting on the fence with this. If you are not actively opposing this genocide, then you are supporting it. So this brings us to the last group. This is what we would call advocacy. It's in the Muslim community, it's groups like Muslim Votes Matter. It's APAN, Australian Advocacy for Palestine Network. It's all these grassroots movements that are actively involved in social, political, and legal advocacy. The rallies and the protests, the writing of articles and posts online, that makes a huge difference. The having conversations with people, the challenging our political representatives who refuse to condemn this genocide. It's this kind of advocacy that makes the difference. And the scholarly record shows that this is the only way we will stop a genocide, by our collective action, by our solidarity. Let me finish by just saying one thing. That is that those people who are currently supporting this genocide, these genocide enablers, particularly the political representatives, they didn't start out as inherently evil, but they have been influenced by Zionist and far-right forces to support this genocide, or to excuse it, or to ignore it, or to condemn those who, like us, who stand against it. Think about this, take this away. If those people can be influenced to support genocide, they can be influenced to support anything. Anything. There is no end to what the Zionists and the far right have installed for Muslim people and those people who stand for human rights and justice. We, all of us, I'm not just saying Muslims, we are Muslims and non-Muslims and peoples of various faiths here in this room. We are together. We are an ummah. We are a community. And those people are against us. They are friends of one another, and we are their targets. We have to stand together now in solidarity with our brothers and sisters and children in Palestine, and with our Indigenous brothers and sisters and children right here. This is the same struggle. It is a struggle against settler colonialism. It is a struggle against supremacism. And supremacism comes from Satan. I'll refer you to a verse in the Quran. Many people would be familiar with it. And I'm going to finish with this. There's a story in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, says to the angels, prostrate to Adam. Created the first man Adam, prostrate to Adam, and they did. But Iblis, Satan, refused, and Allah asked him, why didn't you prostrate? And he said, Ana khayrun minhu, I'm better than him. Khalaqtani min nar wa khalaqtahu min tin. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. Think about what he's saying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's covenant with Adam is, do not follow the shaitan. The shaitan is your avowed enemy. This was his covenant with him. So you have to know your enemy. So the very first dialogue we get from the Quran about Satan, about his characteristics, is this, his ideology. His ideology is about supremacism. He is better than human beings because he's made from fire and we're made from clay. So think about every single atrocity that you can think of from human history, whether it's the transatlantic slave trade, or colonialism, or genocide. And remember, genocide started in this place. It was coined in 1944 by Raphael Lemkin, who observed what happened in Tasmania. Every man, woman, and child was slaughtered in Tasmania between 1803 and the last person died in 1876, with less than 100 years. And that's where the term genocide came from observing what happened right here in this country. So every example you can think of, colonialism, genocide, slavery, the root of that is this supremacism, and that is what we must fight against. So thank you for being here today. Your solidarity is exceptionally important, and because it is the only way we are going to end this genocide. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Halim Rane, for your insightful speech. Now I'd like to invite Auntie Remah. Auntie Remah is a mum, an education and community organizer, and she has lived in Moreton for more than 8 years. She's an avid activist with JFP and can always be found forefronting and heading the fortnightly rallies leading the chants in the Brisbane city. She is our running candidate for Moreton and will be the first Palestinian Australian MP, inshallah. Without further ado, Auntie Naji Remah.
I feel that I got promoted to auntie. Thank you very much, appreciate that. Thank you all for coming today. I would also like to reiterate that we are meeting on the stolen land of the Agara and Yagambeh people, and I want to pay my respects for the elders past and present. Sovereignty of this land was never ceded. It always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And if we are to raise awareness and to fight against oppression, we do that hand in hand with the Indigenous people of this country. Our struggles are the same, they're interconnected. And in the same way that we honour the resistance of the Palestinian people, we also honour the resistance and the steadfastness of the Indigenous people of this land. Alright, so grassroots movements and electoral politics. To me, this is such it's a heavy topic, but it's a topic of interest. So I'm going to start with a few questions. Who is happy with the state of the world? Right, no one. Who wants to change the world? A genuine question. Okay, and who believes that we can change the world? Excellent. So I think what we have in the room here, I can see that the majority, if not all people in this room, are ready for a long-term project that reshapes the landscape of this society, whether it's political, social, economic, etc. And look, I've been out door knocking for the past few months, and one of the things that I noticed is that people are almost completely disengaged from politics. But when I start talking to them about the things that matter, such as childcare costs, grocery bills, housing, dental bills, etc., the level of engagement changes completely. So I think there is this feeling of separation between everyday experiences and our political systems. And this feeling of alienation normally, or separation, it normally leads to increased alienation. This is when people feel alienated from a world they think they don't understand. And there's a cultural theorist called Frederick Jameson. He says that the increased, or argues that the increased conspiracy theories are in part a response to this situation and to this feeling. I've been involved in various grassroots movements even before I settled in this country. And there was something, or it's a recurring pattern, that whenever there is crisis, those grassroots movements are quickly to mobilize in large numbers. But then over time, this energy fades away and is replaced by a sense of apathy and defeat, right? But while these movements create meaningful connections, they create spaces for grief, for hope, they remind us of our collective power. If there is no long-term vision, they end up fading away. And that oftentimes leads to cynicism in politics, because people see their emotional connections and investments in those movements going to waste without a long-lasting impact. So we've got cynicism, we've got disengagement, which I understand entirely. Actually, if we look at history, history tells us two stories about grassroots movements, and those two stories are equally correct. We've got grassroots movements that got co-opted and they were defeated. So one of these examples is the anti-war movement in the US that was mobilized after the election of President Barack Obama, although he continued most of the military policies of his predecessor. But that movement just got completely defeated and demobilized. I'll give you another example from Palestine. After the First Intifada, which was a grassroots movement, the First Intifada ended with the so-called peace accord, the Oslo Accord. And with that Oslo Accord, there was the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. So the First Intifada, or this huge grassroots movement that led the Intifada, thought that, well, there's no need for us to take matters into our own hands now that we have representation. But they were wrong, and they realized they were wrong. So these are some of the examples that lead to cynicism, and sometimes the disengagement from these political projects or grassroots movements. But on the other hand, we've got some grassroots movements that changed the face of history and face of countries. So talk, for example, like you mentioned, Halim, the civil rights movement in the US that led to a Civil Rights Act, led to the Voting Rights Act in the US, take for instance the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa that ended with the fall of apartheid and the election of Nelson Mandela. So we've got two outcomes of these grassroots movements. And if we look at these grassroots movements, regardless of the outcome, they emerged as a result, or they emerged of the frustration of unmet demands. In a healthy democracy, those demands are normally addressed through the current political system. But when they're ignored, these movements become essential for a grassroots organizer to unite under a shared vision and to emphasize the importance of these demands. Any successful grassroots movements will require a diverse coalition that is united under common vision. If a major social transformation is to happen, it will come on the back of grassroots movements rather than from up top. So those grassroots movements on the streets are demands, are slogans, are signs, all of these things. They're very important. What they do, they create this sense of urgency. They challenge the status quo. But where to next? See, the failures of political systems have psychological impact that distorts our view of humanity, which will then make it harder for us to perceive, then fix the systems of oppression we live within. Our role as grassroots organizers and community members is to expand our imagination and look for opportunities beyond what we've been conditioned to believe is possible. So if we are to create a change on the back of grassroots movement, we need to find allies across all spectrums of society. The reality is political parties will have a role in any ecology of organizations, especially if the traditional parties continue to collapse. There's actually an interesting survey that's done by the ANU after each federal election. They've been doing that since the 1967 or 1968, I believe. And it shows us the collapse in loyalty for political parties. So these are the people who would never vote anything apart from either Labour or Liberals. So that percentage reached 28% in the 2022 elections. That's down from about 68% when they first started these surveys. So the conditions are ripe for grassroots movements to create an alternative that resonates with the majority of people. And while we work on changing that political landscape, we shouldn't forget to make allies with other organizations, because if we're looking at an ecology of organizations to make change, we're going to have to think of our allies. And this includes mainstream media. Look, as much as I am a critic of mainstream media, and I'm vocal about it, I still believe that they hold a lot of power. And that's because of their influence, because of their access to a broad range of audience. Of course, independent and alternative media remain very important, and they provide platforms for people who do not fit the mainstream narrative. But sometimes they end up preaching to the converted. And if we are to think of any societal change, we need to make allies with mainstream media. And the relationship between society and media is actually an interesting one. Yes, mainstream media shapes the attitudes and behaviors of society members, but at the same time, media is also shaped by society. So we've got to work on that. And other allies that I personally see as like one of our greatest allies are ordinary people. There's Antonio Gramsci calls ordinary people as organic intellectuals. So these are people who naturally participate in practical life. They pay the bills, they work in different spheres, they are impacted by every single decision that's made by the state. So in order for us to change, we cannot diminish the knowledge and experiences of everyday people and what they bring, the diversity of perspective they bring to the table. In fact, marginalized communities, just as the name suggests, they are marginalized and excluded from decision making because there are very few people who believe they have the privileged view of what works best for society. And that just does not work. Who can think of other allies? So we've got political parties, especially the new emerging political parties, as the traditional parties keep collapsing, the loyalty to traditional parties keep collapsing. Yes, Suri?
Anybody who's fighting for human rights on the front, and also ecological rights as well, you know.
Absolutely.
And everything from our environmental movement, the peace activists, the people standing up for refugee rights, like there's this broad range of people who have the same values as us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Other social justice movements and organizers. Who can think of other allies?
Places of religion should
Absolutely, yes. Religious institutions, yes. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go for it. Our Aboriginal media, absolutely, yes. We've got also unions. They hold a lot of power. Students, of course, and also academic institutions, think tanks. So there is a lot of work for us to do in order to achieve this systemic change. And so why am I bringing media? Why am I bringing unions, think tanks, social justice movements? It's simply because I see every organization as a tool for revolutionary change. And this will mean that grassroots activism in public spaces can expand the possibilities of electoral politics. Who we make allies with is important in our long-term project, in order for our long-term project to work. So for those who said all of us want to change the world, I don't think there's a simple path to changing the world. So to simply say that there is this one aspect that we need to work on is simply misleading. Every organization in our society, including this political project, as I believe a lot of people in the community are ready to engage in politics, each one of these organizations has the potential to achieve different outcomes and different goals. I believe that in order for us to build a diverse coalition of supporters, we need to think outside the traditional ways of thinking. These are the traditional ways that worked in the past. So I'm in no way going to romanticize the golden era of capitalism. So for instance, the era of Whitlam. The things that Gough Whitlam achieved worked for that time. I personally don't believe that they worked because it did not work for the indigenous people of this country. But for those people who believe that it worked, it does not work now. Simply because we're in a different era and the response should be different. So that does not mean in any way that grassroots movements should serve as the voting wing of political parties. In fact, this is a recipe for cooptation. It is a reciprocal relationship between grassroots movements and positions of power. And as I said before, is the understanding that grassroots is not just the means, grassroots is the end. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Auntie Remah. We all wish you endless support in your campaign on your journey to being Australia's first Palestinian MP. I would now like to call upon our final speaker, the President of Australian Palestine Advocacy Network, Uncle Nasser Mashni. He is the co-founder of Australians for Palestine and a founding board member of Olive Kids. With his father's life as a refugee from Palestine during the Nakba in mind, Nasser is determined to continue the struggle for justice and a free Palestine. No further must be said, Uncle Nasser Mashni.
I'm still struggling to be uncle. I'm still struggling with the concept of being uncle, but I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's a real honor to be here this morning with each and every one of you. And because giving up a Saturday morning is no little thing. You know, nothing better than sleeping in and showering a bit later and having a late coffee with your family and loved ones, and to get up early and to come out and to hear us means that you're more excited than most people. Now, I did a science degree, majored in physics, and I'm going to take you on a real, very basic 101 of how the world works. You know, the world is made up of atoms. And the more excited an atom is, the less likely it is to be a solid. So when something is very unexcited, it's very solid. And that's our traditional two-party system. That's our government systems. They are staid and they are solid. When you're excited, the more excited you are, the more space you need as an atom, and you're a gas. Yeah? We're a good gas. Not a bad gas. But we are excited to get out on a Saturday morning. You're excited. You are the agents of change. Now, the thing about a gas, as you heat up a gas, it needs more space. And Gaza has inflamed much of us, yeah? Gaza has been monumentally worldwide a heating motion on atoms, on us as individuals, that we need more space. Now, the solid, being the container that is holding the gas, is our traditional systems. And those traditional systems are the Labor Party, are the Democratic Party, are the Liberal Party, are the Conservative Party, of all of Western leaderships, and they're trying to contain us. Yeah? Our job is to break that. So each and every one of you is an excited atom, is an excited activist, is an excited grassroots movement in and of yourself. Your job is to bump the person next to you, for them to bump the person next to them. And together we can change the world. Together we can change the world. Each and every one of you is the embodiment of an opportunity for a better tomorrow for each and every one of us. Each and every one of you. And you are the most excited because you're here on Saturday morning. You are the most excited. And so with that excitement comes the greatest responsibility. So it's your job to knock two people, for them to knock one each, and so on and so forth. And we can be that change. We can be that change. And one of the very best things about this colony and this country is that it affords people the very best chance of democracy on earth. And I'm telling you, on earth, this is one of the very best places to be. And for much of our community, and I'm going to say our community in the first instance, as a Muslim, as a Palestinian, as a brown person, as an other. Yeah, if you're a Jackson with an X or a Kylie, this joint looks like you, represents you every single day, and you don't have to worry. But if you're Nasser or Abdullah, Remah, or Halim, etc., the opportunities for you to be represented and engaged and benefit from diminish on a sliding scale. And obviously the hardest place to be is an Indigenous person, followed closely by a coloured hijabi, a Muslim, etc., Asian, up to Jackson with an X or Jackson with an X, I mean. Oh, but this is my friend Jackson with an X. Oh, you need better friends. But anyway, so democracy works best when it's represented. Democracy works best when we participate, and this country affords us that space. But it demands that we engage with it. For most of our communities, those other communities, they have come from spaces where democracy is fantastic, because it's amazing how everybody voted 99% for President Nasser. And we'll find that guy who didn't, and we'll re-educate him, and next time we'll be sure that we'll get 100%. That's what democracy looks like in much of the rest of the world, and we've seen evidence of it, whether it's been, what's happened in Bangladesh most recently, but, so many different other spaces. Here, we can make a change. Here, we can actually participate in it and elevate it from a grassroots space. Remah and Halim spoke about that space, and if you want to look back to the South African movement, and it's so pivotally important to do it, because Ronald Reagan was President of the United States, and he was the last domino to fall. He was the last domino to fall. The Secretary of State came in and he said, listen, the House is going to vote against you. The House is going to vote to sanction apartheid. By that point, Gough Whitlam and Malcolm Fraser had sanctioned in the 70s, yeah? The rest of the world gradually got to the point, and South Africa's only friend was the United States, the UK, and the one country that refused to sanction them, Israel. Remember who their best friends are. And only at that last point did Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan choose to sanction South Africa. Not because they were good people, because the grassroots, the excitable activists that got together on Saturdays, spoke to their friends and said, what are you doing about it? This is what we need to do about it. Join me at a meeting, come to a rally, help me hand out a how to vote card. Let's go see our MP and Senator and make sure they understand what's important to me about my country and how it looks and how it might represent itself. Did I lose that then? Yes. Scientists. Whenever in doubt, just go to scientists. How my country might look is dependent on each and every one of us to participate in that space, on each and every one of us to activate, to action, to speak, to encourage, to empower, to find people that look like us, that speak like us, that sound like us, that represent us. Whatever that might be, if you are not engaged in the political process, you are a victim of the political process. You're a victim of it if you're not engaging in it. If the Labor Party looks like you, you should join the Labor Party. If the Liberal Party looks like you, what are you doing here? You're coming to every one of my comedy shows. It's probably what my dad does. If the Liberal Party looks like you, you should join the Liberal Party. If the Greens look like you, if an Independent looks like you, whatever it might be, but you must engage. You must engage. You must volunteer. You must volunteer. You must put money behind this space. Yeah? You must put money. And you, as those most activated, excited individuals, have to excite and motivate other individuals to do the same. Be under no illusion that Gaza 23 has activated the whole world. Never before have we seen the level of protests we have seen on Earth. Not just in Yemen, the videos that come out every week, but in London, in Berlin, in Washington, here, all over the world. Joe Biden didn't just resign because of the candidates that voted. Didn't just resign for that. When they went to Michigan, and they held Michigan, Trump lost presidency and Biden won because of Michigan was one of the few key swing states. And people, registered Democrats, people who have joined a party, pay an annual due to that party, receive the emails, and they're the excited people going, join the Democrats, vote Democrat. They went along and voted and ticked the box that said uncommitted. It wasn't just the debate that got rid of Biden. Palestine, the tag Genocide Joe got rid of Biden. The people spoke. The excited people made a change. We can be that. We're never going back. We're never going back. When I say we, I'm talking about us, others, who when we came to countries and colonies like this endeavour to assimilate as best we can. And what's the best way to assimilate? To find ourselves proximate to whiteness. How do we find ourselves proximate to whiteness? We anglicise our names. You know, we try and fit in. We try and do all the things that make us a bit less of a threat to Jackson. Yeah, I mean, it's natural. We just want to belong. And for many people, and I'll talk firstly as for Palestinians in particular, none of us came from somewhere that was quote unquote safe. If you're a Palestinian, you've come from Lebanon or Syria or Jordan or perhaps Palestine, from a refugee camp, or from a space that didn't afford you the opportunity to express your political identity and opinion. You were not safe. Suddenly you were here and nobody was hassling you for your political ideology, etc. You just kept quiet. You could go about your job and raise your kids. This is something that is very, very appealing to somebody who's come from a despotic regime. But Gaza 23 has said enough. Gaza 23 said, if we just go along, they will do that there, but they will do it here. The standard we walk past is the standard we accept. If we allow Israel to booby-trap pages, are we going to allow them to booby-trap our kids' iPads? This is normal now. This is the new normal. And if we allow Israel to do that there, that will allow every other regime, whatever it looks like, to do it to any one of us anywhere. My friends, it is so very important for us to be talking to everyone and anyone about this. This is a singular opportunity for us to make a change globally. The hypocrisy of the Western world, the rules-based order of human rights, of democracy has been exposed. Because we saw how quickly the world jumped for Ukraine. It used to be chicken Kiev, now it's chicken Kyiv. Russians are allowed to play tennis with a Russian flag. We expelled people, we did all the sanctions, we sent guns and munition to Zelensky and everything you want. We support the whole world over. Every one of those kids looks like Jackson with an X or Kylie with a Y. Unfortunately, the Palestinians don't look like those kids. Muhammad and Fatima, Hind, they don't look like those kids. We need to hold those people in power to account because we see Jackson with an X in the Ukraine and Muhammad and Fatima in Gaza or West Bank or Congo or Haiti or Sudan or Western Sahara or West Papua as equal. We see all of God's children as equal. That's why it's so important for each and every one of you to be part of it, to be the change. Palestine is a vote winner, but it's also going to be a vote loser. And the only way we can make that happen is to hold those people to account and to represent. Be the change, my friends. Be the change. Impact this space. Whatever level it might be, at a council level, you've got a state election coming up. At candidate debates, when you see a candidate in the shopping centre or at the train station, say, what is your position on Palestine? And out them. Take a video as you speak. What is your position on Palestine? Are you calling it a genocide? Have you demanded a ceasefire? I'm sick of you calling for a ceasefire. If I'm having a barbecue and my next door neighbour is beating his wife, I'm going to say, stop it. Stop it. At some point, it's a moral obligation, as we heard from Halim, to do something, to demand, to jump the fence, to call 000. At some point, we have to intervene, and we need to hold those that don't accountable because they are complicit. They are complicit. Impact each and every one of your spaces, my friends. We are excited atoms in a chamber that is being held, and that chamber is the existing power structures. We need to break that space and liberate the world. A free Palestine will free the world. And I want to leave you with this quote from Martin Luther King. He said, we will long forget the words of our enemies. We'll forget the words of our enemies. What we won't forget is the silence of our friends.
Nasser. We will now have a Q&A panel chaired by Auntie Remah. Please, if you have a question, raise your hand and the microphone will find its way to you.
We just had a microphone situation.
Yes.
We're ready now. Thank you very much. Thank you, Halim. Thank you, Nasser. Thank you, Omar, Benil, and thank you to the members of Rochdale Mosque for hosting us today. And thank you to everyone here. I know that we are all excited, and I think we are ready to get the October 13th stickers that are with Kamala. So these are the stickers about our anniversary rally on the 13th of October, and we want to make it the biggest rally this city has ever seen. So before you go, I'm just going to ask you to see Kamala. She's going to give you some stickers and just stick them whatever you want. Workplace, at the traffic lights, maybe outside the shopping center, whatever you want. But we want these stickers everywhere. We want people to know that we're holding the biggest rally this city has ever seen. All right, I'm gonna ask you all, anyone who has questions, please raise your hand. If you have a comment, I might ask you to keep that comment until we finish Q&A, and then we can have a conversation as we're having lunch together. All right, who has questions? Yes, Ahmed.
Thank you. Ahmed Abdel Hamid, strengthened candidate for the Greens.
Thanks, Ahmed. Acknowledge you.
My question is that everything we see every day and how we are shocked to our core get us into believing what actually our values here in Australia, the rule of law. We were told to be Australian, we stand to Australian laws, and we have a problem, obviously, because we're coming from the Middle East, we could probably don't understand the democracy as they know it here. But okay, we are here, we understand the rule of law, and I don't see it actually applying to the other people. I feel like we are in conflict with our values here in Australia, and I want to understand that the way how they portray it, are we actually the troublemakers here when we heard Quran to Muslim and non-Muslim people talking about covenant and peacemaking, and people who are Muslims are happy to welcome other non-Muslims and live with them in peace and happiness. We are already protesting and walking in the streets peacefully, regardless how they want to portray it. We have been doing this for over 10 years without making any troubles, and this is the example of peace, of the real movement that we believe in. But they don't want to see that. They want to see only violence that would represent our values and our culture. It feels like the question has to come to, are we the peacemakers or the troublemakers?
Thank you, Ahmed. And I would like to acknowledge that Ahmed is standing up for the seat of Morton with the Greens. So thank you very much for doing that.
Hold on, aren't you the Morton?
Ahmed is standing up for Stratton. It's a state electorate.
I think you said Morton, sorry.
I'm in Morton. Ahmed is in Stratton. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone want to answer this? I think this is more of an answer to the establishment and to the people who are not already excited and here in the room. I think all of us here understand that all of these endeavors, we want to see justice prevail rather than the current unequal human rights that is applied disproportionately. We are seeing the hypocrisy of our Western governments as they apply different rules to different people, and there is a disconnect between those governments and the establishment and the real people who are suffering, who are grieving at the moment, who are in pain. And when some of these people are trying to express their opinions or express their disappointment and discontent, rightly so, they are portrayed as troublemakers and as sometimes a threat to social cohesion. Did you want to answer this, Halim?
Thank you. I think there's a point that we have to make to our political representatives, that they're not letting this on to us. And the point is this: they are representatives of us as citizens in our various constituencies, right, in our electorates. But they are also representatives of the state. And the state of Australia has a treaty with the other states around the world. That treaty is called the United Nations Charter. And that is all about preserving peace and security in the world. They are in violation of their obligation to the state according to the terms of what we call the rules-based international order. You could just simply call it international law. They are in violation of that. And that's what every politician needs to be called out on, that they are not fulfilling their obligations to us as citizens, nor are they fulfilling their obligations to the state as a representative that is obliged to uphold international law. They are obliged to listen to the rulings of and implement the rulings of, particularly the UN Security Council and the International Court of Justice, the latter of which has already ruled about the unlawfulness of Israel's occupation of Palestine and that this genocide must come to an end. And they're failing on both accounts. No, we are not the troublemakers. We are the ones that are trying to protect our people from extermination. The worst thing you can do on this planet, according to the rules that everybody and every state on this planet has agreed to commit to. This is the point. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a question.
My question is, the Muslim vote matters and the Muslim vote. I have no doubt both of them are doing with sincere intention, mobilization, grassroots level. Is there any collaboration, cooperation at some level? Because if they both operate independently, we will end up diluting our collective force or collective power at grassroots level. We will end up diluting. And people need some sort of clarity an ordinary organic voter or whatever I am, I'm a bit confused who to go with.
Thank you for that question. Excellent question. There are two major organisations or grassroots movements that have developed in Australia over the past several months. One's called the Muslim Vote, and the other one's called Muslim Votes Matter. So you can understand why there's a little bit of confusion about this. The names sound very similar. The Muslim Vote is essentially organised to support people who want to run as candidates in various elections. Mainly it's concentrated in Sydney, but in other places too. Muslim Votes Matter, which is the organisation that I'm a part of, that Ustaz Fadlullah is the chair of the Queensland branch, and there are branches all over the country. So Muslim Votes Matter is about education. It's about educating people, starting with the Muslim community, but other communities as well, about how to vote. A lot of people don't know how to vote. They don't know that they have to be enrolled to vote. They don't know what it means to make a valid vote. A lot of people do donkey votes. Their votes become invalid, right? So they're ineffectual. And many politicians are happy to leave people like this because they know no problem. What Muslim Votes Matter wants is that every Muslim, for a start, and then other communities, more broadly, understand how to vote. They understand how to make a valid vote. And the second part of it is who to vote for. What Muslim Votes Matter is doing is research on every single candidate around the country to create a scorecard. And first on that list is, where do you stand in relation to Palestine and the genocide? But that's not the only issue. We do not want political representatives that have no humanity, no sense of justice, no compassion. We need political representatives that have mercy, that have compassion, that put the rights of human beings, of people, of us, before foreign powers like Israel and the United States. They put our concerns, our welfare and well-being before the profit-making of these various big corporate entities. Muslim Votes Matter is about giving you the information you need to make an informed decision when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that?
I'd just like to add, Muslim Vote Matter is working with other communities. It started off with the Muslim community, and we want to educate them, but we are working together with the Christian community, we're working together with the Islander community, because neither party is, I'm not an immigrant, but many of the Islander community, the Arab Christian community are also concerned about the attitudes of both parties towards immigration, towards migrants, towards integration. So we are working together with non-Muslims as well. So we're not exclusive organisation, and we have a lot of non-Muslims working together with Muslim Votes Matter. So it's not exclusive.
Stars, I have another point here. Sorry, you asked a very important point too. Are these two competing, or are they working together? They're working together. They have regular meetings. I think they meet, the main organisers of both of them meet on a weekly basis. They're in regular communication. They're not competitors. They're complementary.
But there is in the community where I live and people I meet, really no one knows. Today I got clarity, okay, Muslim vote matters about educating the masses.
Yeah.
And the Muslim vote is about supporting, selecting, choosing those people who are suitable for that job.
I understand what you're saying. May I just say this? When people don't understand things, sometimes that's not the fault of the organisation. The organisations have information on the internet. If people don't inform themselves, we can't always be responsible for that. So if people are ignorant or unaware, sometimes that's on them too. The information is there, people can read it, people can come to events and inform themselves. It's not always the fault of the organisation, I'll just say that.
Brother Muhammad, very quickly, when the election gets called, I mean, at the moment there's like look, and I don't know either of the organisations or the leaders. Today, there is no actual election campaign. Once that happens, that's when the real work would start, number one. Number two, you're an excited atom. Yeah? So you've now been charged with the responsibility of going to everyone that you know and going, this is the Muslim vote, and this is Muslim vote matters, yeah? So it's on each and every one of us. And to extend on what our brother here just said, Palestine isn't just about Palestine. Yeah? It isn't just about Palestine. If you think about this from a global perspective, of a movement perspective for humanity, if they defeat Palestine, tomorrow what chance do we have on the climate? Tomorrow what chance do we have for our children to buy a home? What chance do we have for any sort of equality or humanity or shared future if they know what the blueprint is to destroy a movement that has activated humanity for a year? It's so very important for us to win. But also when we talk about the Muslim vote matters, and it's really good that you're working with the Pacifica communities and other communities who have been othered, yeah, and haven't participated. And if you are one of the solids, yeah, the Labor or Liberal Party, you want that container to stay really tight. And it's a wonderful thing when people don't vote or don't know how to vote. When people don't know how to vote and don't vote, that's a great thing if you're the incumbent. Yeah? So when we talk about Palestine, we're talking about a shared humanity, and I talk about AMO. Arabs, Muslim and Christian, because the Arabs firstly will see their brothers, yeah? But then I say the Muslims, who are not Arab, who believe in a concept of the Ummah, yeah? Who say, that's my brother, that's my sister, if not them, then it's me. But then the others, they're not Arab, Muslim or Christian, they're not Muslim. But they're others, they're Pacificans, they're Christians, they're whites, and saying, how can my government sit by and allow a Holocaust to happen and not say anything? It's been 1 year, you're still calling. Nobody's picking up. Do more. Say more. Stop sending guns, kick out the ambassador, recall our ambassador, impose sanctions, pretend they're half Ukrainian. When we're talking about this as a concept, as a community, we are trying to obviously engage our communities. I'm saying Gaza 23, as an Australian, for my children and my grandchildren, as an Australian, this is the best thing ever. Democracy works best when every voice and every participant is involved. The horror of Gaza, we cannot let it go. We cannot let it be wasted. But the ideals we are holding are not Islamic ideals, they are human ideals. They're human ideals. There isn't a religion that doesn't say, kill, etc. The 10 Commandments, it sits within the 3 Abrahamic religions. If you just lived your life, don't kill, don't steal, don't rape, don't murder, share, this is a good human. It's a good human. Let's all just do that together. And whether the Muslim vote or, what's the other one?
Muslim votes matter.
Muslim votes matter. That's what polarizes you, so be it. But be excited and get to the AMOs, yeah? Everyone matters. Together we change the world.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. My name's Alex. I just wanted to highlight one of the options that Nasser missed off, which is that if you look like the socialists, join the socialists. And Australia's had only ever one revolutionary socialist elected to any state or federal parliament in Australia's history. And obviously, relatively speaking, we're quite small at the moment, but internationally and historically, the socialist movement has got a lot of experience of thinking about this question about grassroots movements and electoral politics. And I feel very confident in saying that there is basically nothing good in this society that wasn't won by grassroots people pushing for it and arguing for it. And even the very fact, last time we could go and have our rally through the city, a few decades ago, people in this city were getting arrested just to try and win that very right. Even the most simple things that we take for granted to be able the right to go out and express our opinion is something that we had to fight for and win that right. So, and everything, trade unions, the weekends, living standards, domestic violence, everything which is good in our society has been a result of, people pushing for it and winning for it. And I guess, to me, so the point I wanted to make in relation to that, probably many things I could say, but I think a lot of people think of electoral politics as just like, either have activism or whoever else you have electoral politics. To me, I think it's actually much more around what is the politics you take into the electoral arena. And I mean, I feel like we need to campaign for justice in every arena. On the streets, in academia, in the media, everywhere, in the trade unions, everywhere. And also in the electoral arena. So the question is, what politics do we bring into that electoral arena? And I think that's actually, and I think in that context, is that connection between grassroots politics, grassroots struggles, and representation in the electoral arena, which makes a difference.
Absolutely, thank you, Alex. I actually just want to give an example of how policy platform can change because of connection to grassroots. So the Greens, for instance, they had different policies when it comes to Palestine. They were slightly reluctant about talking about Palestine in progressive terms. However, this changed. So now, as a Palestinian, I look at the policy platform of the Greens, and there is not one single thing that I see is not representative of my aspirations as a Palestinian. So you look at the self-determination for Palestinian people. They're not pushing for a two-state solution. They're saying this is up to the Palestinians because they respect the right to self-determination. They call it apartheid, they call it genocide, and they also support boycotts. So this only changed, I think, about a year ago, and this happened because of connection to grassroots organizers and people in the community who are passionate about Palestine. And the same goes for other policies. I don't think there is any party that have every single policy, but it's through that connection to community members is where those policies are formulated so that they respond to the needs of the community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Actually, one more thing. I'd like to actually introduce Jonathan Strauss. He's our Socialist Alliance candidate for Senate. So just so people know the option. Yeah.
You made a good point. What is it that you bring to politics or this political situation? Everybody in this room, ask yourself this question. Why is it that nurses in this country pay more tax than the mining companies? Why is it that students are paying more in their HECS repayments than the mining companies are contributing to our tax revenue? Why is it that people cannot afford a house while someone else has 5 houses? Why is it that you can't get your teeth fixed and your whole well-being depends on your dental hygiene and your dental situation? Why is that not in Medicare? Why is your mental health not in Medicare? Why are there ads on TV non-stop about gambling when in this country we have the highest gambling addiction in the world and families are torn apart because of this problem? Why is it that we cannot address the problem of domestic violence? 1 woman is killed every week in this country. There's been 60 women killed already this year. Alcohol, pornography and gambling are the major contributors. Why is there nothing done to restrict these things? The answer to all of these questions is that the Liberal Party and the Labor Party work in the service of corporations. They do not care about the welfare and well-being of people. This is the absolute fact of the matter, and none of them can deny it. We have to hold them to account. They must work in the service of us, the people. They must work in the service of the welfare and well-being of people in this country, not the corporations. There are 30 people in this country that have $300 billion between them, and they don't pay tax. All of us in this room pay more tax than them. How is that justice? How is that right? How is that allowed? The politicians in this country, and I'm specifically talking about Liberal and Labor, absolutely have to be held to account. Palestine is the catalyst. It is a litmus test for the injustices that have gone on in this world for too long, that go on in nations like Australia. Politicians have to be held to account. When you vote, think about every single injustice. Think about the cost of living, think about the housing crisis, think about domestic violence, think about gambling addiction and alcohol abuse. All of that is on these politicians. We have to hold them to account because nobody else will. Thank you.
Thank you. Acknowledge you, Jonathan. Running for Senate? Yes. And you have a question?
Although I would comment that I guess I think the Labor and Liberal parties are pretty well tested, so maybe they need to be replaced rather than thinking we can draw them to account. But my question actually...
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So my question, and it's going to come across you a bit bluntly because I might otherwise spend a bit of time to explain this, is basically, for those of us involved in the Palestine solidarity movement, are we under an obligation to join our unions, to be active in our unions, and to take solidarity in the workplace into that and solidarity internationally for Palestine and for human rights? Are we under that obligation? Can I preface that, or can I explain that why and give an example, exemplify it? So two things. Firstly, so unions are membership organisations. Ultimately, well-organised, the members can control and make their unions fighting organisations for them to actually resolve some of those inequalities in society. But also, they're very subject to state laws, to co-option and so on, and that's actually a lot of our experience of them. So if you want to change it, you've got to get involved. Here's an example. At the moment, some of us are fighting for the academic boycott of Israeli universities, the institutional boycott, I should say more exactly, because it will stand in solidarity, that will stand in solidarity with Palestine. And frankly, I have people who are involved in the group there in Cairns, our Free Palestine group in far north Queensland. They are people in my workplace. They are not members. I talk with them, I explain with them, if you join, this will make a difference. Because I can go to the union as a whole and say, people are joining because we are looking to stand in solidarity with Palestine. It matters to people in the union already that other people want to join because of that. But they're not joining yet, at least. And we need to actually work to get people to join and be involved because that will swing things. That will make a difference. So the question is, are people, and I mean a moral and political if you like, are they under such an obligation?
Thank you, Jonathan. I think people have a moral obligation to do their part. However, to oblige people to join their unions, I don't think that I'm in a position to oblige people to do that. People can participate in however way they want. I'm personally a union member, and I'm also working within the NTEU to push for the academic boycotts. And I understand the power of us as unionists in terms of pushing those long-term projects that we are working on, such as the academic boycotts of Israeli institutions. That said, I believe that there are different avenues, various avenues for people to participate in terms of achieving the systemic change that we are hoping to achieve. So those avenues, as I said before, include unions. They might include through mainstream media. They can include even think tanks, even participating in panel discussions like these. All of these things will eventually lead to our shared vision being realized. I would love to see people joining unions. However, the reality at the moment is that union memberships are in decline because some unions have been institutionalized and people sometimes have lost their trust in union membership. We have seen the cooptation of some unions. We have seen that unions who are affiliated to the Labour Party, for instance, those unions, they've just showed how cooptation works, and people have lost a lot of that trust in the unions. So whether that means we should say that you are obliged to join the movement, I don't think I will oblige anyone to do so. However, I will encourage people to think of their options in terms of their moral obligations towards achieving the justice that we keep talking about, that we keep protesting for. That's just my personal answer to it. I'll pass on to Halim.
So Jonathan, in a Nasser regime, you wouldn't need a union because I'd be so fantastic and everything would be perfect. Unfortunately, we've come to a world that has forgotten that left to their own devices, a boss will regress to the point where they'll send you down the mine with a canary. Given the opportunity, with a perhaps no, they need you to come back tomorrow, Jonathan. They will send the canary down. And given the opportunity, bosses will regress to that. As Halim said, the top 30 Australians are worth $300 billion and pay less tax than a student. Every one of the politicians that's my age in Canberra today, like me, paid no HECS. And whilst it wasn't completely revolutionary, Gough Whitlam, the reality is Gough Whitlam gave women no-fault divorces, gave women childcare, gave women the opportunity for a free tertiary education, because before that, a family went, well, we've got enough money to send one kid, Mary's going to get married, we'll send her to secondary school, but we'll send Bob Jr. to university because, you know, the education won't get wasted. Yeah? So there was a moment of significant change, being Medicare and a number of different things that Gough Whitlam did, and every one of those Labor politicians that's in place today has been the beneficiary of what was then revolutionary. Not quite enough for us, and we'd like a lot more, I know, Alex. But it's because we have not engaged, because we have got metaphorically fat. If you are an Australian today, yeah? If you're an Australian today and you own or are paying off your own home, you're not 1%ers. You're 001%ers. The toilet water we flush is better than the drinking water than 700 million Indians drink. Yeah? The roof over your head already puts you ahead of 3 or 4 billion human beings. The iPhone or Google phone you've got in your hand, etc., etc. But with that comes a responsibility. And if we're going to make change, we have to be in places where we can make that change. And firstly and foremostly, it is in your unions. It is in your workplaces. If you're in a union, nobody can compel you, and I won't compel you. In a Nasser regime, of course, you'd be compelled. But as a human being, I would urge you to join your unions. I would urge you, again, to find the political person who looks most like you, whether it's a socialist or a Green, in the back another Green, or a Labor, whoever it might be that looks like you, and by looking like you represents who you are. Yeah? Represents who you are. It's not a physical sense. If they look like you, sound like you, speak like you, care like you, are you, vote, volunteer, support, find funds, get along, uplift and push. That's the only way we make a change. Or the Nasser regime.
Of course. But just to add, change, as Bernie Sanders said, not Chomsky, it doesn't happen just at election time. Yeah. We have to prepare for the next 4 years.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's a constant process. We can't just be active at election time. We have to prepare in advance. And that's the only way that change will come.
Absolutely. The ecology of organizations. We need everyone all the time. And we have time for 2 questions. Yes, Sophie.
Before I ask mine, I understand. The men have mostly spoken, so I'm going to pass the microphone first to one of the sisters that has a question.
Well done, John.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. My name is Ashara. This may be a bit of a loaded question. I've been part of grassroots movements for some time, organizing, now working as a professional, so have matured as a teenager into the professional space. My question is, how does grassroots movements, the momentum that you mentioned before, then translates into everyday actions, into different spaces and spheres? Because what we're talking about is an ideological shift, right? We're talking about morality and ethics that have to shift in our politics today. That may be seen as too disruptive for a set of people who are used to a way of being, who are used to a two-party system. How does this grassroots momentum continue past the 4-year election cycle, continue in different union spaces, education spaces, early childhood spaces? You know, how does it keep going towards that long-term vision? How do you bring people who have historically been voting in for parties that they have either been assimilated to because it's seen as stability, because it's seen as security for them to continue being here. I think that it's something that I'm seeing with family and community around me who understand the politics behind parties who are not Liberal or Labour, but feel that will it actually enable change for 10 years, 20 years? You know, how do you address that with the shift, with the power that comes from grassroots organising?
Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you. Would you like to?
That's a really good question, thank you. One thing everybody should realise is that the political landscape is already changing. Back in the 1990s, about 90% of Australians voted for one of the two major parties, Liberal or Labor. Their proportion of the Australian electorate now, the vote, is now less than 70%. If you looked at it on a graph, Liberal and Labor are going down like this. If you also look on that same graph, Independents and Greens are going up like this. Their vote has increased in direct correlation with the decrease of the two major parties. So the political landscape is changing. That's because people are realising that the two major parties are not working in the service of ordinary people. They work in the service of foreign governments, like Israel and the United States, and the big corporations. The grassroots movement will be successful because each of us has family and friends and colleagues and people we can speak to. You've been at this event today, you've heard the information. Now we all need to have conversations with the people who we know and we love and who love us and trust us. And we have to advise them, and we have to help them, and we have to help the society and our communities make a cultural change. We have to stop thinking about the benefit of society in terms of what's economically the best thing. We have been enculturated to think that the best thing revolves around what's economically best. Think about when you watch the news, they talk about this flood, this fire, this disaster, how many people were killed. Maybe they mention it, maybe they don't. But the very next thing they point out is what happened to the FTSE 500 or the Nasdaq or the Dow Jones as a consequence of that. Everything is determined and valued by the basis of its economic importance or value. This culture has to change. We have to stop with this mindset of valuing things on the basis of how much money does it make. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing at the university is not how much money it makes. It's what kind of graduate are we producing? How have we equipped them to go out and confront the challenges of the world? But they have become corporatized. They've become like big businesses. They've lost sight of their original purpose. And I'm talking about the industry that I'm in. Everybody can think about their own industry. If you're in the medical industry, the hospital is thinking about how much money did they. That's not your. Doesn't matter how much money you made. That's not your purpose. How many people did you help? How many people did you fix of their medical ailments or their mental ailments, whatever the situation is? We have to change the way we think about society. It's not about how much money is generated. It's about how did we help people. We have to come back to that. Thank you.
This is a really, really good question, yeah? And Professor Halim is talking about exactly who we should be, and it's a beautiful thing. But we're getting back to basics. I don't know who your friends are. I don't know your networks. What I hope that you take away, and by you I mean every single one of you, is some of the tools necessary to, and the stories perhaps for you to be able to bump the person next to you. What we do to make change is live our ideals, to speak our ideals, to advocate for our ideals with those that care for us, listen to us, that we have influence over. Yeah? So each and every one of us has 10 or 15 or 20 people that are close to us. Yeah? And there's 100 or so of us here. That's 2,000 people that we can impact in the next week. And if we impact them and they each impact just 1 or 2 people, that's 4,000 or 5,000. Now that's 6,000. And if each one of those does 1 or 2 people, so we can live our ideals, speak our ideals, be our ideals, but we have to educate it. the very best thing, every generation of people that comes here becomes more and more participatory or an understanding of that process. And the decline of the two-party vote is now below 70%, where Halim is talking. And it's because increasingly those parties are staid and solid and are not changing. And it's our jobs, if they don't change, to give viable alternatives, whatever those viable alternatives are, but it's incumbent on us to speak to people who might not be sure, who might not understand, who might not be educated, but they need to vote below the line, above the line, what a full vote looks like, how to put, how to vote cards into language, into community, for people to be able to understand, so we can make that change. But the responsibility comes onto each of us. There's only so much information that can sit at a very high level, but Rashida? Ishara, beautiful. Ishara, I don't know your friends or your circle of influence, yeah? So the duty, the compulsion is upon us individually to make that change and to impact everybody else. Go forth and multiply.
Thank you. Thanks, Nasser, Halim, and Ishara. And I just want to say quickly, in terms of disruptions, I think this movement has changed the way things are done. And people have more appetite to take risks now because we've normalized a lot of the things that some people who are engaged in social justice movements have not done before, especially the younger generation. And now they're seeing those disruptive actions as necessary actions to activate that sense of urgency. So I think that everything we're doing, those direct actions and everything, they will have a long-lasting effect in terms of people understanding that taking risk is actually not bad. Taking risk is necessary if we are serious about making change in this world. And the society will respond to that. The society will respond to those actions that we're taking, going, oh, you know what, actually blockading a weapons company is not radical. How come we can view this as radical? In the past, blockading these things were like, what are you guys doing here? Why are you blockading them? Why are you protesting in front of this? But now people understand and they drive past, they honk, and they're like, good on you people. So I think we've normalized a lot of these so-called disruptive actions, and that's one step towards what we are hoping to achieve. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, of course, if we're looking to achieve systemic change, solidarity across different social justice movements is very important. So yes, I understand that some people are still stuck with the two-party system, but when they see more and more people around them, because anyone, we're social creatures, and we have different people from diverse backgrounds and diverse interests and concerns around us. When they see more and more people are actually getting together and fighting towards the same thing, they have the same enemy, if you want to call it enemy, then people will also rethink their choices. And this is one of the effects that what we're doing right now, one of the impacts that we will see and will change the world around us. Thank you, Ishara. I hope this answers your question. I think, yeah, that's all the time we have, but I do encourage you to ask us. I know some of you have a question, you're more than welcome to come after. After we finish and wrap up, or while we're having lunch. I just want to thank every single one of you today. Thank you, Nasser. Thank you, Halim, Benil, Ahmad, and everyone involved in this panel discussion. Thank you for the organizers and Grassroots. And I just wanted to end on this note that someone once said that bearing witness carries responsibility. So we see those atrocities and we say, no, I'm not looking away. This is going to change me forever. And I believe that every single one of us here is changed forever. Please see Kamala to get the stickers, and we'll see you either out in the streets or anywhere where we'll hold those educational forums, we'll hold panel discussions, and we will not stop talking about changing the world to make it a world that's working for all of us, by all of us, and with all of us. Thank you.